My name is Maria, and for 45 years, my hands told the story of my life. They were a roadmap of sacrifice, marked with the fine scars of a seamstress's needle and the rough calluses from cleaning the homes of people who had more than I could ever dream of. My late husband, Antonio, used to hold them at the end of a long day, his own hands thick and powerful from a life in construction. He'd trace the lines on my palms and say, "These hands built our family, Maria." Brick by brick, he was right. We didn't have much, but we had a foundation of hard work, honesty, and a fierce, quiet love for our children, Sophia and Daniel. Antonio was gone now, 10 years past, but the foundation he spoke of remained. It was in the small house he'd poured his soul into, the garden I tended with religious care, and the nest egg we had painstakingly saved. It was $25,000, a fortune to us, scraped together from decades of overtime and careful budgeting. We called it our Golden Years Fund, a little cushion for a time when our bodies might finally betray our spirits. But our children were our real gold, our true legacy. Sophia, my daughter, was like me, grounded, compassionate, with a heart that understood the value of things that money couldn't buy. She married a good man, a teacher, and they lived a simple, happy life a few towns over. And then there was Daniel, my brilliant, ambitious son. He was the one who was going to fly higher than we ever could. He got a scholarship, went to a fine university, and landed a job in finance. He moved in circles I only ever saw on television, full of polished surfaces and easy laughter. I was so proud it felt like a constant ache in my chest. He was ashamed, though I only understood that later. Ashamed of our little house with its worn furniture, ashamed of his father's work-stained boots that I kept polished by the door, ashamed of the story my hands told. His shame became a blinding light when he met Amelia Covington. Her family was what people called old money, their name was on buildings. They spoke of summers in Europe and winters in the Caribbean as if they were discussing a trip to the grocery store. Amelia was a lovely girl, I suppose, but she existed in a different atmosphere, a thinner air that I found difficult to breathe. When they announced their engagement, Daniel was ecstatic. He was also terrified. He wanted a wedding that would impress the Covingtons, an event that would firmly plant his feet in their world and erase the dirt of his own origins. He came to me one Sunday, his face tight with a kind of anxiety I'd never seen in him before. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with his homework and soothed his childhood fevers. He spoke in circles about venues, caterers, and the impossible expectations of Amelia's mother. He never asked directly. He was too clever for that. But he painted a picture of a dream just out of reach, a humiliation waiting to happen. And I, his mother, who had spent a lifetime protecting him from pain, walked to the old metal box where Antonio and I kept our important papers. I took out the savings book for our Golden Years Fund. The next day, I went to the bank and had a draft made out for the full $25,000. When I gave it to him, his eyes widened. For a moment, a flicker of the little boy I knew shone through his sophisticated veneer. He hugged me, a quick, almost formal embrace, and whispered, "Thank you, Mom. This means everything I thought it did." I thought it was a bridge he could use to cross over into his new life, and that once he was safely on the other side, he would remember the mother who had built it for him. I was wrong. It wasn't a bridge, it was a wall he was building to keep me out. The wedding day arrived, a spectacle of ivory and gold. The venue was a country club with towering columns and sprawling lawns that looked like they were manicured with scissors. I wore the best dress I could afford, a simple navy blue outfit that I'd altered myself to fit perfectly. I felt like a sparrow that had wandered into a peacock enclosure. The Covingtons were polite in a distant, fragile way, as if they were afraid I might break something. I sat alone in the front pew, a solitary, blue-clad figure in a sea of champagne-colored silk. My daughter, Sophia, sat beside me, her hand resting on my arm, a silent anchor in that overwhelming ocean of wealth. The ceremony was beautiful and Amelia looked like a princess. But a strange coldness had begun to seep into my bones. During the reception, I watched my son. He moved with an easy grace among his new tribe, laughing, shaking hands, his posture straight, his shoulders back. He never once looked my way. He was performing, and the role of the humble son of a working-class woman had been cut from the script. Then came the speeches. Mr. Covington stood up, a tall, confident man with a voice that filled the room. He spoke of welcoming Daniel into their family, of his bright future. Then Amelia gave a lovely, tearful speech about her wonderful new husband. And then it was Daniel's turn. He walked to the microphone, his handsome face glowing under the soft lights. He looked directly at Amelia's parents, who were seated at the head table. "I don't know how to begin," he started, his voice thick with emotion. "To the Covingtons, to my new parents, Charles and Eleanor, thank you. Thank you for making this day, this absolute dream, a reality. Your generosity, your support, it's what made all of this possible." He swept his arm, gesturing to the opulent room, the crystal glasses, the cascades of white roses. "Everything you see here tonight is a testament to your incredible kindness. You have given me a new life, and you have given me your most precious gift, your daughter. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of it all." The room erupted in applause. People were dabbing their eyes. Charles Covington beamed, placing a proud hand on Daniel's shoulder. And I sat there, at my small table near the back, and I vanished. It was not a slow fade. It was a sudden, violent erasure. He had taken my life savings, the fruit of my husband's sweat and my own aching back, and he had presented it as a gift from them. He had thanked them for my sacrifice. He hadn't just forgotten me, he had actively replaced me. The $25,000, every dollar a story, every dollar a piece of me and Antonio, had been rendered meaningless, a ghost transaction in a life I was no longer a part of. The air left my lungs. The sound in the room became a dull, distant roar. The cut was so clean, so deep, I didn't even feel the blade go in. I only felt the cold emptiness where my heart was supposed to be. I don't remember much of the rest of the evening. I think I smiled. I know Sophia squeezed my hand so hard her knuckles were white. She looked at me, her eyes flashing with a fury that I was too hollow to feel myself. I just felt quiet, utterly and completely quiet inside. When it was time to leave, I approached Daniel and Amelia. I kissed her cheek and wished her happiness. Then I looked at my son. I put my hands on his arms, the expensive fabric of his tuxedo feeling foreign and stiff under my worn palms. "Congratulations, Daniel," I said. My voice was even. He looked relieved, as if he'd been expecting a scene. He didn't see the gaping wound. He just saw his old mother, playing her part. The drive home was silent. Sophia drove my little car, her jaw set. The silence in the car was different from the silence inside me. Hers was filled with rage, mine was a vacuum. When we pulled up to my small house, she turned off the engine and looked at me. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling. "I am so sorry. What he did, it was monstrous." I just nodded. I didn't have the words. I got out of the car, walked up the path Antonio had laid, and went inside. The house felt enormous and empty. I sat in Antonio's old armchair, the one with the permanent indent of his shoulders. I didn't cry. Crying felt like an indulgence, a feeling for someone who still mattered. I felt like a piece of furniture that had been left behind in a move. All night, I sat there in the dark, and the shock slowly, piece by piece, began to transform. It wasn't burning into anger. It was cooling, hardening into something else. Something solid. Something heavy and clear, like a block of ice. It was resolve. He had wanted to erase me, to pretend I didn't exist, that my contribution was nothing. He had built his new life on a foundation of lies, using my bricks, my mortar, my husband's memory. And in that quiet, dark living room, I decided that I would not let his lie be the final word. This was not about revenge. Revenge is a hot, messy thing. This was about truth. It was about dignity. It was about honoring the story of my hands and the man who had cherished them. My sacrifice was real. My contribution was real. I was real. And I would not let him make me a ghost. The next morning, I woke with a strange sense of purpose. I made my coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. I opened the old metal box again. Inside, under Antonio's military service medals and our marriage certificate, was a large manila folder. It was labeled Daniel's wedding. I had been so organized, so proud. I laid all the documents out on the table. The receipt for the $25,000 bank draft. The contracts with the caterer and the florist, which I had paid the deposits on. And at the very bottom, another file. It was for my final wedding gift to them, a surprise I was going to announce after they returned. It was a 2-week honeymoon in Italy. A first-class trip to Rome, Florence, and the Amalfi Coast. I had pictured their faces when I told them. I had imagined their joy. I had paid for the entire thing a month before, another $15,000 from what little was left of our savings. It was the last, grandest gesture of a mother's love. I looked at the itinerary, the confirmation numbers, the name of the travel agent. My name, Maria Rossi. Purchaser. I picked up the phone. My hand was steady. I dialed the number for the travel agency. A pleasant young woman answered. I gave her the booking reference. Yes, Mr. and Mrs. Rossi's honeymoon to Italy, she said cheerfully. They must be so excited. There has been a change of plans, I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. I am the purchaser, Maria Rossi. I need to cancel this trip. There was a pause on the other end. Cancel, madam? But it's non-refundable. Well, a portion is. You would lose the deposits, over $5,000. I am aware, I said. Please cancel everything that can be canceled and refund the remaining balance to my account. And please be sure to inform Mr. Daniel Rossi that the trip has been canceled by the original purchaser. The agent was flustered, but she did as I asked. When I hung up the phone, I didn't feel a surge of triumph. I felt a quiet click, like a lock settling into place. I had not destroyed his dream. I had simply reclaimed my own. The money that returned to my account was not just currency, it was a piece of my dignity returned. The $5,000 I lost was the price of a lesson for both of us. It took less than 2 hours. My phone rang, the screen flashing with Daniel's name. I let it ring for a moment, took a deep breath and answered. I didn't say anything. What did you do? He shouted, his voice cracking with disbelief and fury. There was no greeting, no preamble. Just the raw, undiluted rage of a spoiled child whose toy had been taken away. I just got a call from the travel agent. They said you canceled our honeymoon. How could you? Are you trying to ruin my life? I listened. I let his words, sharp and ugly, fly past me. They no longer had the power to cut. I was no longer standing in their path. Amelia is in the other room crying. Her parents are going to hear about this. You're trying to embarrass me. When he finally paused to take a breath, I spoke. My voice was so quiet it forced him to be silent to hear it. Embarrassment, Daniel, I said, is a son who stands up in front of 100 people and pretends his mother doesn't exist. Embarrassment is taking the money your father broke his back for and using it to impress people who look down on him. What I did was not about embarrassment. It was a simple correction to the record. A correction, he sputtered. You call this a correction? This is revenge. This is you being selfish and petty because you didn't get enough attention. No, Daniel, I said, and for the first time, I felt a tremor of something close to pity for him. He was completely blind. You wanted to build a life where I was invisible. I am simply refusing to be invisible. The trip was a gift from me. A gift. And one does not accept gifts from someone they believe has nothing to offer. The transaction is now closed. I heard him stammering, searching for another weapon, another accusation. But he had none left. I had the truth, and it was a shield he could not penetrate. I have to go now, Daniel, I said softly, and I hung up the phone. I had not raised my voice. I had not insulted him. I had simply drawn a line in the sand of my own soul, a line that said, "You may not cross here." The days that followed were quiet. Sophia called, and I told her what I had done. There was a long silence on the line, and then she said, her voice full of a daughter's fierce pride, "Good, Mom. Good for you." It was never about the money, was it? It was about respect. Her words were a balm. She brought my granddaughter, Lily, to visit that weekend. Lily, with her innocent eyes that saw nothing but her grandma, ran into my arms. She had made me a drawing, a colorful picture of the two of us holding hands in my garden. Underneath, she had written in wobbly letters, "Grandma is my hero." I took that drawing and I put it in a frame, right next to the photograph of Antonio. That was my legacy. Not the son who flew too close to a son that wasn't his, but the daughter who stayed on the ground and the granddaughter who knew the value of a hand to hold. With the refunded money from the trip and some of the remainder from the wedding fund, I did something for myself. I hired a contractor to build a small, beautiful sunroom off the back of the house, overlooking my garden. It was my space. A room filled with light. I started volunteering at the local community center, teaching a sewing class to young single mothers. I was showing them how to mend things, but I was also teaching them how to create something strong and beautiful out of simple cloth. I was telling my own story through them. News of Daniel trickled in through Sophia. She never offered it gleefully, only with a quiet sadness. The lie about the wedding funding had, inevitably, come out. Amelia's parents, it turned out, were far more offended by Daniel's deceit than they ever were by his humble origins. They valued honesty above all, and my son had shown he had none. The marriage, built on such a flimsy, false foundation, began to crack. He and Amelia were in counseling. His job was stressful. The life he had so desperately wanted to buy was not at all what he had imagined. About a year after the wedding, he showed up at my door. He looked thinner, his eyes tired. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. He stood on the porch, not quite meeting my eye. I invited him in. He looked around the house, at the new sunroom, at Lily's drawing on the wall. He was not there to apologize. Not really. He was there to offload his misery. He complained about Amelia, about the Kivingtons, about the pressure. He hinted that a little money might help smooth things over. I listened patiently. When he was done, I didn't offer sympathy or solutions. I walked over to the mantelpiece and took down the framed photograph of his father. "Do you remember your father's hands, Daniel?" I asked. He looked confused. "I remember them being rough," he mumbled. "They were rough," I agreed. "They were rough from mixing cement in the freezing cold and from hauling lumber in the blistering sun. They were rough so that your hands could be smooth. He built this house with those hands. He built your future with those hands. And when you stood up at your wedding and gave credit for his life's work to another man, you didn't just erase me. You erased him." Tears welled in his eyes then. Not tears of self-pity, but the first tears of what I hoped was genuine shame. He had no reply. He just stood up, nodded slowly, and walked out. He left defeated, but for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope that he might one day find his way back, not to me, but to himself. 2 weeks later, a simple text message appeared on my phone. It said, "I'm sorry, Mom. You were right about Dad's hands. I'm sorry, it wasn't everything, but it was something. It was a start. My life now is quiet, but it is not empty. It is full. It's full of the morning sun in my new room, the smell of soil in my garden, the laughter of my granddaughter, and the grateful faces of the women in my sewing class. My peace is no longer dependent on my son's approval or his presence. I have found my own value, not in a bank account or a grand gesture, but in the simple, sturdy fabric of my own life." I see Lily in the garden, trying to help me pull weeds. She holds up a tiny dandelion. "Look, Grandma. A magic flower," she says. I smile. She sees magic where others see weeds. She sees a hero where her father saw an obstacle. The relationship with my son is not healed. Perhaps it never will be completely. But that is his journey now. I have finished mine. I learned, in the harshest way possible, a simple truth. You can give your children wings, but you cannot make them honor the nest. A tree that is ashamed of its roots will never find the strength to withstand the storm. And my roots, the ones Antonio and I laid down with our own 2 hands, are deep and strong. And here, in my own garden, I am finally standing tall in the sun.